The distance was exactly 43 yards from checkout lane 6 to the pharmacy entrance where the gunman had taken cover. Danny Rodriguez had made more difficult shots in Afghanistan, but never with innocent civilians in the line of fire, and never using an improvised weapon in a crowded supermarket. Danny had been working his Saturday afternoon shift at Martinez Supermarket for exactly 2 hours and 37 minutes, when the first gunshot shattered the peaceful suburban shopping atmosphere. He had been bagging groceries for Mrs. Chun, an elderly regular customer who always bought the same items every Saturday: whole milk, Wonder Bread, bananas, and a single can of Campbell's tomato soup. She was counting out exact change from her worn leather purse, taking her time as she always did, when the automatic doors at the front of the store exploded inward under the force of a heavily armed man in military-style clothing. The gunman was approximately 6 feet tall, wearing black tactical gear, and carrying what Danny immediately recognized as a modified AR-15 assault rifle with a high-capacity magazine. His movements were erratic and unpredictable, suggesting either drug influence or severe psychological distress. But his weapon handling showed enough competence to make him extremely dangerous in the confined space of the grocery store. Danny's military training kicked in automatically, overriding his civilian persona as his mind shifted into the tactical assessment mode that had kept him alive through 14 months of combat deployment in Afghanistan's most dangerous regions. Within 3 seconds of the gunman's entrance, Danny had processed multiple pieces of critical information: the shooter's weapon type and ammunition capacity, his likely field of fire from his current position, the number of potential civilian casualties in his immediate vicinity, and the available cover and concealment options throughout the store. Welcome to those who left a trace, where ordinary people carry the most extraordinary secrets. Before we dive into this incredible story of a grocery store worker whose hidden past would prevent a mass shooting and save 17 lives, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe that heroes can be found in the most unexpected places, hit that subscribe button right now and join our community of over 750,000 subscribers who love these powerful stories that prove anyone can leave a lasting trace. What none of the terrified shoppers diving for cover behind cereal displays and produce stands knew was that Danny Rodriguez, the quiet 22-year-old who bagged their groceries and asked paper or plastic, with a friendly smile, was a decorated Marine Corps Scout sniper with 47 confirmed kills and a service record that read like something from an action movie. Danny's military career had begun immediately after his high school graduation in East Los Angeles, when limited college options and a desire to serve his country had led him to enlist in the United States Marine Corps. His exceptional eyesight, steady hands, and natural ability with firearms had quickly identified him as sniper material, earning him selection for Marine Corps Scout Sniper School at Marine Corps Base Quantico. The 8-month Scout Sniper program had been one of the most demanding military training courses in the world, with a failure rate exceeding 70%. Students were required to master not only precision marksmanship at extreme distances, but also advanced fieldcraft, camouflage and concealment, target identification, range estimation, ballistics calculation, and the psychological skills necessary to function effectively as a long-range precision marksman in combat environments. Danny had graduated second in his class, earning recognition for his exceptional abilities in urban warfare scenarios and his remarkable talent for making accurate shots under extreme stress conditions. His instructors had noted his unusual combination of technical precision and intuitive shooting ability, describing him as a natural-born sniper who could consistently hit targets at distances that challenged even experienced marksmen. Following his graduation from Scout Sniper School, Danny had been assigned to 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine Regiment, and deployed to Afghanistan as part of Operation Enduring Freedom. His unit had been stationed in Helmand Province, one of the most dangerous and heavily contested regions in the country, where Taliban and Al-Qaeda forces maintained a strong presence and regularly engaged coalition forces in complex urban and rural combat operations. Danny's first combat deployment had lasted 14 months and had included some of the most intense fighting of the entire Afghan conflict. His unit had participated in major operations throughout Helmand Province, engaging enemy forces in environments ranging from dense urban areas to remote mountain valleys. As the battalion's primary scout sniper, Danny had been responsible for providing precision fire support during combat operations, eliminating high-value targets, and conducting reconnaissance missions that provided critical intelligence about enemy positions and activities. His combat record had been extraordinary by any measure. Over 14 months of deployment, Danny had made 47 confirmed kills at distances ranging from 150 yards to 1,247 yards, with his longest shot representing a Marine Corps record for precision marksmanship under combat conditions. His targets had included enemy snipers, machine gun teams, improvised explosive device emplacers, and several high-ranking Taliban commanders whose elimination had significantly disrupted enemy operations in his area of responsibility. But Danny's most significant contribution to his unit's success had been his ability to provide overwatch protection for Marine patrols and operations in urban environments. His position as an elevated marksman had allowed him to identify and eliminate threats before they could engage Marine ground forces, preventing numerous casualties and enabling his unit to complete missions that would otherwise have been impossible or prohibitively dangerous. The psychological challenges of serving as a combat sniper had been immense. Unlike other military specialties where combat engagement was brief and chaotic, sniper operations required Danny to observe his targets through high-powered optics for extended periods, studying their behavior and routines before making the decision to take their lives. Each shot required careful calculation and deliberate action, forcing him to confront the moral and psychological implications of his actions in ways that other combat roles did not require. Danny's deployment had ended abruptly when an improvised explosive device detonated near his overwatch position during a patrol operation in Marja. The blast had thrown him from his concealed position and caused a traumatic brain injury that ended his sniper career and ultimately led to his medical discharge from the Marine Corps. Although his physical injuries had healed completely, the psychological trauma of his combat experience and the sudden end of his military career had left him struggling to adapt to civilian life. The transition from elite military specialist to civilian college student had been extraordinarily difficult. Danny had enrolled at Los Angeles Community College using his GI Bill benefits, intending to study criminal justice and eventually pursue a career in law enforcement. But the contrast between the intense purpose and clear mission of military service and the seemingly meaningless routine of civilian education had left him feeling lost and disconnected from his new environment. The part-time job at Martinez Supermarket had been a practical necessity to supplement his veterans' benefits and help pay for living expenses while attending college. The work was simple, required no special skills or training, and provided flexible hours that accommodated his class schedule. Most importantly, it was completely undemanding and routine, offering a peaceful alternative to the constant stress and hypervigilance that had characterized his military service. For 3 years, Danny had successfully maintained his civilian cover, presenting himself as just another young man working his way through college with a part-time retail job. His co-workers knew him as quiet and reliable, always willing to work extra shifts and help with difficult customers. His supervisors appreciated his punctuality, his attention to detail, and his complete lack of drama or workplace conflicts. The customers at Martinez Supermarket saw Danny as exactly what he appeared to be, a polite, hard-working young Hispanic man who bagged their groceries efficiently and always offered to help carry purchases to their cars. Many of them had been shopping at the store for years and had watched Danny work his way through high school and into college, viewing him as a positive example of young people taking responsibility for their education and future. None of them suspected that the friendly grocery bagger who asked about their weekend plans and remembered their usual shopping preferences was a decorated combat veteran with specialized training in precision marksmanship and tactical operations. Danny had deliberately chosen to keep his military background private, partly to avoid the uncomfortable conversations and misplaced sympathy that often accompanied veteran status, but primarily because he was trying to build a civilian identity that wasn't defined by his military service and combat experience. The morning of the shooting had started like every other Saturday shift. Danny had arrived at work at 1 p.m., clocked in, and began his usual routine of bagging groceries, collecting shopping carts from the parking lot, and helping elderly customers carry their purchases to their vehicles. The store had been busy but not unusually crowded, with a typical weekend mix of families doing their weekly shopping and individuals picking up items for weekend activities. Danny had been working checkout lane 6, partnered with Maria Gonzalez, a cashier who had been with the store for over 10 years and treated him like a younger brother. They had developed an efficient rhythm over their years working together, with Maria handling the customer interactions and payment processing, while Danny focused on bagging groceries in a way that maximized efficiency while ensuring that delicate items were protected and heavy items were distributed properly. The routine had been interrupted at 3:17 p.m. when the store's automatic doors burst inward and Michael Harrison, a 34-year-old former military contractor with a history of mental health problems and grievances against what he perceived as societal injustices, entered the store carrying an AR-15 assault rifle and over 200 rounds of ammunition. Harrison had been planning his attack for over 3 months, conducting surveillance of the store to identify peak shopping hours and studying the layout to determine the most effective positions for maximizing casualties. His target selection had been deliberate. Martinez Supermarket served a predominantly Hispanic community, and Harrison's attack was motivated by racial hatred and a desire to inflict maximum psychological trauma on what he viewed as an undesirable population. The gunman's entrance had created immediate chaos throughout the store. Shoppers screamed and dove for cover behind displays, shopping carts, and checkout counters. Store employees activated emergency procedures, calling 911 and attempting to evacuate customers through emergency exits. The store's manager, Roberto Martinez, had triggered the silent alarm system while guiding customers toward the rear exits and away from the gunman's position near the front entrance. But Harrison had positioned himself strategically to control the main customer traffic areas and prevent easy escape through the primary exits. His military contractor background had provided him with tactical training that he was using to maximum advantage, moving systematically through the store while engaging targets of opportunity and forcing civilians into predetermined kill zones where they would be vulnerable to sustain automatic fire. Danny's response to the crisis had been immediate and instinctive. While other employees and customers were focused on escaping or hiding, his combat training had automatically shifted him into tactical assessment mode. Within seconds of Harrison's entrance, Danny had evaluated the gunman's weapon, ammunition capacity, movement patterns, and tactical positioning. More importantly, he had identified the specific threat that Harrison posed to civilians trapped in the store. The distance from Danny's position at checkout lane 6 to Harrison's current position near the pharmacy entrance was exactly 43 yards, a range that Danny had practiced extensively during his military training and had successfully engaged targets at during combat operations in Afghanistan. But the tactical challenges of the current situation were far more complex than anything he had faced during his military service. In combat, Danny's targets have been enemy combatants in environments where collateral damage to civilian populations was concerned, but not an immediate factor in his shooting decisions. The crowded grocery store presented a completely different tactical problem. Harrison was moving among innocent civilians who could be used as human shields. The store's layout created multiple background obstacles that could cause ricochets or overpenetration injuries, and Danny would have to improvise weapons and shooting positions using materials and equipment never designed for precision marksmanship. Most critically, Danny had to make his tactical decisions and execute his response without revealing his military background or specialized training to the civilians around him. Any acknowledgement of his sniper capabilities would compromise his carefully maintained civilian cover and potentially create additional complications if he survived the encounter and had to explain his actions to law enforcement and media investigators. Danny's immediate priority was neutralizing Harrison before he could systematically execute the civilians trapped in the store. His military experience had taught him to recognize the tactical indicators of a mass shooting event, and Harrison's methodical movement patterns and target engagement suggested that he was implementing a predetermined plan designed to maximize casualties over a sustained period of time. The improvised weapon that Danny selected was a modified shopping cart equipped with a telescopic handle mechanism that could be locked at various heights to accommodate different customers. By removing the basket portion and locking the telescopic handle at full extension, Danny was able to create a makeshift shooting rest that would provide the stability necessary for precision marksmanship at 43 yards. The ammunition for Danny's improvised weapon system came from the store's sporting goods section, where Martinez Supermarket maintained a small inventory of hunting and recreational shooting supplies. Danny was able to access a display case containing .308 Winchester hunting ammunition, which was compatible with a hunting rifle that another customer had abandoned near the sporting goods counter when Harrison began his attack. The tactical challenge was positioning himself for an effective shot while remaining concealed from Harrison's position and avoiding detection by the panicked civilians who might inadvertently compromise his position through their movements or vocalizations. Danny used his knowledge of the store's layout, gained through 3 years of working in the facility, to identify a shooting position behind the customer service counter that would provide concealment, a stable shooting rest, and a clear line of sight to Harrison's likely movement routes. The psychological pressure of the situation was unlike anything Danny had experienced during his military service. In combat, his targets had been clearly defined enemy combatants whose elimination was both legally and morally justified within the context of military operations. But his current situation required him to make split-second decisions about using lethal force in a civilian environment without official authorization and with potential legal consequences that could affect the rest of his life. More challenging was the presence of innocent civilians whose safety depended entirely on Danny's ability to make an accurate shot under conditions that were far from ideal. Unlike his military service, where missed shots might compromise mission objectives or unit safety, any error in his current situation would result in immediate civilian casualties and potentially give Harrison additional opportunities to continue his attack. Danny's military training had included extensive instruction in combat decision-making under extreme stress, but the current situation required him to apply those skills in a context for which no training could have prepared him. He had to simultaneously function as a tactical marksman, a tactical commander responsible for civilian safety, and a civilian witness to a criminal act who might later be required to justify his actions to law enforcement and legal authorities. The shot that Danny ultimately took was executed from a prone position behind the customer service counter, using the telescopic shopping cart handle as a shooting rest and the abandoned hunting rifle loaded with .308 Winchester ammunition. The distance was 43 yards. The target was a moving individual surrounded by potential civilian casualties, and the shooting position was improvised using equipment never designed for precision marksmanship. Danny's combat experience had taught him to control his breathing, calculate range and wind effects, and execute trigger control under extreme stress conditions. But the current situation also required him to account for factors that had never been relevant during his military service. The acoustic effect of gunfire in an enclosed civilian space, the psychological trauma that would be inflicted on civilian witnesses, and the potential for law enforcement misidentification if he was observed with a weapon when first responders arrived at the scene. The single shot that Danny fired struck Harrison's center mass, immediately ending the attack and preventing what investigators later determined would have been a systematic execution of at least 17 civilians trapped in the store. Harrison's ammunition load and tactical preparation suggested that he had planned to continue the attack for at least 20 minutes, methodically moving through the store while executing customers and employees until law enforcement tactical teams could respond and neutralize the threat. The immediate aftermath of Danny's intervention was chaotic and emotionally devastating for everyone involved. The civilians who had witnessed the shooting were traumatized by the violence they had experienced and confused about how the attack had been stopped so effectively and quickly. Store employees were struggling to process the fact that their quiet co-worker had somehow neutralized an armed gunman using skills and equipment that seemed impossible for a part-time grocery bagger to possess. Law enforcement response teams arrive at the scene within 4 minutes of the first 911 calls, expecting to find an active shooter situation requiring tactical intervention. Instead, they discovered a resolved scene with the gunman neutralized and civilians providing aid to wounded victims while maintaining good order and discipline that suggested professional coordination and leadership. The initial police interviews with witnesses revealed conflicting and confusing accounts of how the attack had been stopped. Several customers reported that they had observed Danny Rodriguez, the grocery store employee, in the vicinity of where the final shot had been fired, but none of them had actually seen him discharge a weapon or could explain how a part-time retail worker had managed to neutralize a heavily armed and tactically trained gunman. Danny's own account to investigating officers was carefully constructed to acknowledge his role in ending the attack while concealing the full extent of his military training and combat experience. He reported that he had access to a hunting rifle that had been abandoned by another customer, that he had some familiarity with firearms from recreational shooting, and that he had taken a shot to protect innocent civilians when it became clear that the gunman intended to continue killing people. The criminal investigation that followed the shooting validated Danny's actions and confirmed that his intervention had prevented multiple additional casualties. Ballistics analysis verified that the single shot that killed Harrison had been fired from the improvised position behind the customer service counter, and witness testimonies supported Danny's account of his actions during the crisis. But the investigation also raised questions about Danny's background and training that he was reluctant to answer completely. His marksmanship skills were clearly far beyond what would be expected from casual recreational shooting experience, and his tactical decision-making during the crisis suggested military or law enforcement training that he had not acknowledged in his initial statements to investigators. The resolution came when Detective Sarah Williams, the lead investigator assigned the case, discovered Danny's military service record during a routine background check. His decorated combat service and specialized sniper training provided the context that explained his exceptional performance during the grocery store shooting, but also raised new questions about why he concealed his background and what other relevant information he might not have disclosed. Danny's decision to reveal his military history to investigators was difficult and painful, representing the end of his carefully maintained civilian anonymity and the beginning of unwanted public attention to his combat service and personal struggles with veteran transition issues. But the disclosure also provided law enforcement with the information they needed to complete their investigation and officially classify his actions as justifiable self-defense and defense of others. The media attention that followed the grocery store shooting transformed Danny from an anonymous part-time worker into a reluctant public figure whose story resonated with veterans, law enforcement personnel, and civilians throughout the country. His successful transition from combat sniper to civilian hero provided hope and inspiration to other veterans struggling with similar challenges, while his humble and reluctant approach to the attention he received earned widespread respect and admiration. But Danny's most significant contribution to his community came through the changes that his actions inspired in emergency preparedness and civilian response training. The Martinez supermarket shooting had demonstrated both the effectiveness of trained individuals in preventing mass casualty events and the importance of preparing civilians to respond effectively to active shooter situations. Working with local law enforcement agencies and veteran organizations, Danny developed training programs that taught basic tactical awareness and emergency response skills to retail workers, teachers, and other civilians who might find themselves in positions to intervene during crisis situations. His programs emphasize situational awareness, basic first aid, and communication with law enforcement rather than tactical engagement skills that would be inappropriate for civilian populations. The training programs that Danny created were adopted by retailers and educational institutions throughout the region, providing thousands of civilians with the knowledge and confidence needed to respond effectively to emergency situations without requiring them to possess advanced tactical skills or specialized equipment. His approach emphasized prevention and preparation rather than confrontation, helping ordinary people develop the awareness and judgment needed to protect themselves and others during crisis situations. Danny's work with veteran transition programs had an equally significant impact on his community and beyond. His successful integration of military skills and civilian responsibilities provided a model for other veterans struggling to find purpose and direction after their military service ended. His willingness to discuss his own challenges with post-combat adjustment and civilian transition helped reduce the stigma and isolation that many veterans experience when seeking help and support. The scholarship program that Danny established using proceeds from his media appearances and public speaking engagements provided educational opportunities for military veterans pursuing civilian careers in public safety, education, and community service. His scholarship specifically targeted veterans who were interested in using their military training and experience to benefit civilian communities rather than pursuing careers in security or law enforcement fields that might not address their desire to serve others. 5 years after the Martinez supermarket shooting, Danny's influence on civilian emergency preparedness and veteran transition support had expanded far beyond his local community. His training programs were being used in schools and businesses throughout multiple states, and his veteran support initiatives had helped hundreds of former military personnel successfully transition to civilian careers in education, social services, and community leadership roles. The grocery store where Danny had worked during the shooting was renovated and reopened as a community center that housed veteran services, emergency preparedness training programs, and educational initiatives designed to build stronger connections between military veterans and the civilian communities they had served. The center served as both a memorial to the victims of the shooting and a symbol of the positive change that could emerge from tragedy when individuals chose to use their experiences to help others. Danny himself had completed his education and begun working as a counselor specializing in veteran transition issues and trauma recovery. His combination of combat experience and civilian education provided him with unique insights into the challenges faced by military personnel adjusting to civilian life, and his success in his own transition made him an effective advocate for veterans seeking support and guidance. The annual memorial service held at the community center attracted veterans, law enforcement officers, and civilians from throughout the region who came to honor the victims of the shooting while celebrating the positive changes that had resulted from Danny's response to crisis. The event served as both a reminder of the ongoing threats that communities faced and a demonstration of the remarkable capacity for healing and growth that could emerge from even the most traumatic circumstances. 10 years after the shooting, Danny's impact on the community and the broader veteran population had become immeasurable. The training programs he had developed were being used throughout the country. The veteran support services he had created had helped thousands of former military personnel successfully transition to civilian careers, and his example had inspired other veterans to find ways to use their military skills and experience to benefit the communities they now called home. The trace that Danny had left was written in the lives that had been saved, the veterans who had found new purpose, and the communities that had become more prepared and resilient in the face of potential threats. His legacy demonstrated that heroism could be found in the most ordinary circumstances, and that the most profound changes often came from individuals who had never sought recognition or attention for their contributions. The grocery bagger who had been dismissed as just another part-time worker had become a guardian whose influence continued to protect and inspire people throughout the country. His story proved that everyone deserved respect regardless of their apparent position or circumstances, and that the most powerful traces were often left by those who served others without seeking acknowledgement for their sacrifices. The 43-yard shot that Danny had made to stop Michael Harrison had lasted less than a second, but the changes that resulted from that moment had created a lasting legacy that would continue protecting communities and supporting veterans for generations to come. In the end, the quiet young man who had bagged groceries while hiding his extraordinary past had left the most important trace of all: proof that heroes could be found in the most unexpected places, ready to act when their communities needed them most.